Welcome back to the channel, Bridging the Gap Student to Engineer, where STEM professionals provide advice to students. This video is another school deep dive, this time into the University of Florida. They have a dynamic dashboard, but it doesn't really give us a ton of information, so let's just get right into it. The University of Florida makes their UF graduation survey results available through their Student Outcomes webpage via the Center Career Connection Center. So let's get into the data. So the data that they're showing us is 23-24 graduate survey, so the most recent, and which is great. And then I've filtered for the College of Engineering, and we're just looking at all the majors. One thing that is not compliant with industry standards is that this survey is done at graduation rather than 6 months later. Typically, we want to see the results for 6 months after graduation, just as giving grads a chance to find that job or get into grad school or do those kind of things. So just knowing that this is at graduation and is not entirely comparing apples to apples when we look at other results. But on the left, we have graduation plans or postgraduate plans. Because these are plans, there is overlap. Most people plan to work full-time, about a quarter plan to go to grad school, which is about the typical percent for engineering schools. I like seeing that a lot of people are planning on traveling because after graduation or even in college is a great time to do that. So there's a couple things I want to point out with some of the data over here. So internship experience, they differentiate non-academic internship and academic internship. They don't necessarily define that, but they have most of their grads had a non-academic internship. I would like to see the academic internship much higher than it is here. Typically that will result in a lower percent of students that can get a job after graduation. So we'll look into that as we keep moving. As far as research experience, 41% have research experience, 59% none. In engineering undergrad, that is not surprising. Not a whole lot of engineering undergrads will have research experience. Okay, then we look at people who wanted to do grad school and then those looking for employment. So this is, again, at graduation. So if you're applying to grad school, you should know by the time you graduate from undergrad. And so looking at the percent that did not get accepted or had not yet been accepted to grad school, that's a pretty high percent. 22% had applied to grad school and not gotten in. Pretty high percent, so a little bit disappointing there. And then when we look at full-time employment transition, so 63% had gotten a job by the time they graduated, while 30% are waiting or searching still. And then 6% said they would search after graduation. So the reason that I pointed out that this data is upon graduation is because it's a little bit hard to compare these numbers with the 6 months after graduation. But these are low numbers. If it was 63% had a job after 6 months, I'd be super concerned. I still am pretty concerned with 30% still waiting or looking or searching, and then 6% not even starting their job search until they graduate. Those are not great numbers for the University of Florida Engineering. And then what we're going to do next is go over to the employment section. And again, I'm going to filter for engineering, and we're going to talk about that data. So average salary 83, that is a really good number, and we're starting to see a lot more schools in the 80,000s with their 24 graduates, so that's really good. And then the top 5 employers, so something that they say is only filtered by degree in college. So if you do come back here with the link that I provide and select for majors, you can't really get any better on the top 5 employers. But let me just go through these and talk about them. So Kimley Horn is an engineering planning and design company that does a lot of infrastructure, all types of different infrastructure. I will provide the link here if you want to look at it quickly. It is nice that they hire a lot of employers, or it's nice that they hire a lot of employees from the University of Florida. So infrastructure is really what that is. Lucky Part and Northrop Grumman, both aerospace and defense, so pretty big at the University of Florida. Procter & Gamble is consumer goods, and then Microsoft software. So, so an interesting mix of industries in this top 5. Now, something to point out on the top 5 states is the school is in Florida, given its name, and that's not unusual for the top state to be the state where the school is. And then Texas, California, and Washington are quite often the top states out of state for schools, but Georgia is also in here. So an interesting one there, obviously nearby Florida, but if if you're interested in Atlanta or other places in Georgia, University of Florida might be able to get you there. Okay, now I also want to point out occupations. So if we look at the School of Engineering has mostly engineering occupations after graduation. The computer programming, coding. If I do go in here and take out the computer science major, this computer programming goes down to pretty low numbers. So so engineering majors are ending up with computer programming and coding jobs, whether or not they are majoring in computer science, which is not unusual. And then we've just got lots of other little things, data analysis and those kind of things. Construction is something I thought was interesting that it's being so low. Typically, there'll be more grads going into construction, but you can see that just general, specifically to engineering, is pretty common for engineering grads. And then we go to industry. So typically when we look at schools, a lot of schools will focus on a particular industry or send a lot of their grads to the industry. University of Florida sends just about 10% to aerospace and aviation, which would be the Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, reflected in the top 5 employers. Manufacturing is also reasonably large, and it's not as big as it is in some other schools, so but still predominant in the industry. Energy is only 5%. There are schools that are in Texas or other places where there's more energy industry that would recruit a lot more heavily for energy jobs. So something to be aware of if you are looking for a specific industry, that the University of Florida doesn't send a ton of people to some of these smaller industries. Thank you for listening to the end of this video. Please like, subscribe, share with a friend. Check out our other videos. We've got a lot of videos about choosing a school and other topics that you may be interested in. We will see you on the next one.